Repealing universal voting rights? Repealing the 19th Amendment? It's Christians whom are making this argument on social media and on other platforms. We'll have more to say on that shortly on this edition of Irrespective. Welcome each and every one of you to this Wednesday night edition of these episodic series that we have put together for our audience, where we discuss all things. We examine all things through the light of Scripture. As you know, or maybe you don't, you might be watching this for the first time ever. But for those of you that do know, our names haven't changed, and they won't change in the near or distant future. I'm Gio, that's Jesus, and we are the co-hosts of Irrespective.
So Peter got himself a new name, and you and I are still holding on to what mom and dad respectively gave us.
So what are we saying? That we're behind the curve here, that we have to update ourselves somehow?
We have to have a conversation with Jesus.
I agree. I do agree
What
with
would
this.
you like Jesus to call you?
Maximus Meridius.
I would like for Jesus to call me home. And then I'd be out of here.
Folks, before we continue, remember to subscribe, to hit the notification bell, and also to hit the thumbs up. When there is organic interest on content, the algorithms will pick it up and begin to share it with others. We encourage you to do that this evening if you have not yet done so. Also, interact with us in the chat, ask your questions pertaining to the topic, and also place your comments on the very same. Now, some of you...
I have an idea of what I'd like to be called.
Go ahead.
My name should be, don't pay attention to me.
Why?
Because when people call me,
I see.
I can just go on.
It's what do they call it? It's a slight there. It's a turn of hand there.
I can just go on doing what I'm doing. Don't pay attention to me.
I agree. Folks, before we get into the topic this evening, we had introduced a segment, a brand new segment just a couple of episodes ago, titled Retard of the Week. And we had saved it for the ending of one of the previous editions, but we have to play it at the beginning here. Why? Let me give you some backdrop as to why we are naming this person the Retard of the Week. We're speaking of none other than that great Christian man, the House Speaker, Mike Johnson. Why have we featured him in this edition of Retard of the Week? Well, remember that he recessed Congress early because Thomas Massie and some other politicians are trying to pass a resolution that would bypass the Speaker's chair to force the Trump administration to release the Epstein files. And when that was getting a bit too hot because of the vested interests that are involved in all of that, including the Israeli government and whatnot, he recessed early. Johnson had informed, this good Christian man had informed his constituents and others that he would be in Louisiana in his district to speak to his constituents. Curiously enough, the Louisianans, whom are part of his district, never saw Mike Johnson. They were looking for him. They found him nowhere.
Where could Mike have gone?
They found him nowhere. He appeared at the Wailing Wall, and he recorded a short video for everyone to see. And that's why we have Mike Johnson, current Speaker of the House of Congress, of the House of Representatives, as this week's Retard of the Week. By the way, that is our neighbor's dog, and he posed for us for that photo. This is what Johnson said, by the way, at the Wailing Wall.
Mike Johnson, the 56th Speaker of the House of Representatives in America. We're here with a delegation of members of the House. We're so grateful to be in Israel, particularly on this day, recognizing the destruction of the two temples and two times in history. But it is such a moving time for us to be here at the Wailing Wall. We've offered our prayers. We put our notes into the wall as just traditional. And we're so moved by the hospitality of the people and the great love of Israel. Our prayer is that America will always stand with Israel, and that we will we pray for the preservation and the peace of Jerusalem. That's what Scripture tells us to do. It's a matter of faith for us and a commitment that we have. God bless you.
That's very interesting, isn't it?
Oh, anytime I need my prayers answered, Gio, you know what I do.
What do you do?
I go to Wailing Whales.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, every time these new fans that supposedly give us electricity do their thing, more whales are deciding to not participate in the whaling.
Right.
So we have less whaling whales.
Less whaling and less whaling at the wall, and there's less electricity.
Yes.
Well,
Plus
folks,
all this paper that gets used up
correct.
in prayers, and sticking
Because they're always putting it into the crevices, as it were, of where the brick lays.
yes,
Now,
and that's when the Muslims take him. Oh, look what he's praying for.
well, you're not too far off from the truth. And some of you might ask, how do you know that this sort of taking of those papers that they place traditionally inside of those crevices of that wall, which the Jews say are the remnants of Herod's temple? By the way, small side note, if you know anything about history, that is not any remnant, as it were, of the temple itself. That was probably a refractionary wall, as they would call it, to sustain a portion of the temple. Jesus said very clearly that in AD 70, he prophesied that there would be no stone left upon a stone. And that's exactly what happened when Titus and the Roman armies marched through there in AD 70. There was no stone left on the stone. What's left there, some have surmised, is probably an old Roman barracks, or probably again, a refractory wall that was placed there by Herod to sustain one of the walls. However, Mossad too can play that game. You think that you are experts in spycraft. We have persons whom work for Irrespective that are infiltrated in Mossad. And we knew beforehand that Mike Johnson was lying to his constituents and that he would take a delegation secretly to Israel to satisfy the Israeli masters of a lot of Congress. So we said, it would be a good idea if we have one of our spies infiltrated into Mossad, take the paper that Mike Johnson had placed at this so-called Wailing Wall.
They have the results already.
Well, it's not the results. We actually have the piece of paper here, folks, delivered, hand-signed by Mike Johnson. And you're going to be shocked at the contents of this letter.
Was this UPS or FedEx?
No, this was DHL.
DHL.
They were it was cheaper to get to us. My esteemed co-host, would you mind reading the contents of said letter?
I would prefer to.
You want me to read
yes,
it? Why?
Yes.
But look, they even tied it up in a nice bow for us.
No, because I think you are more in tune to the happenings of the Wailing Wall. So I opt out.
All right.
And I shall just be a listener.
We remind the audience this is the actual paper that was signed by Mike Johnson. The message in here is signed by Mike Johnson. Our spies infiltrated into Mossad got us this. We just received it yesterday evening. So this is a first, folks. You are going to be hearing what he wrote and to whom he wrote this. Some might surmise incorrectly that he wrote some sort of a prayer to Almighty God. You would be wrong. Here it is. Quote, to Bibi. So he's not writing anything to God. He's writing it to Benjamin Netanyahu.
To his beloved Beefy.
Right. Let me stretch this out a little bit, because you know how it is when they place the notes inside the wall. They fold it, so
the parchment
it is yes,
it's tough. Yeah.
It's not very good paper, by the way.
No,
it looks like Office Depot paper.
Parchment.
Right. Quote, listen, I know that you send your Mossad goons to pick and read the notes that we leave on the wall for political theater. Therefore, I'm sure this will get to you. I'm well aware of your gripe that Americans are beginning to notice that you and your government manipulates the majority of us in Congress like if we were your sock puppets. This is pretty honest, pretty brutally honest at this point. Huh?
At least if he was that honest here, we would have a better speaker.
Well, exactly. Well said. There's a side note here in a parentheses.
Side note and parentheses.
By the way, thank you for the yarmulke that I used on the wall as a prop. However, I wasn't too happy when I found out that you personally commissioned its construction from an old dead camel's butt as an inside joke.
Dehydrated.
It's not funny. That thing smelled worse than Miriam Adelson and Mark Levin combined.
It was dehydrated.
Wow.
You know, camels can go for a long time without water, but this one, he was parched.
But Netanyahu seems to be a bit of a jokester, huh?
He is.
Interesting.
What a prankster.
Back to the main point. This is Johnson. He continues. Rest assured, we're attempting to keep up the charade, but there's only so much a girly Louisianan like me can do to restrain the cracks on the dam. Puts another side note here in parentheses. Trust me on the girly thing. My wife reminds me every day that she doesn't stay with me because of my manliness. She stays because of the perks of my being in Congress. Anyways, where was I? He continues. May I gently suggest that you stop shooting innocents and starving millions? The optics aren't great. No matter how much your people chant King of Israel at your rallies. Come on, man. Just because they chant that, it doesn't give you permission to act like King David. Dadgummit, there's a southerner in him that comes out. Dadgummit, at least that guy could write decent lyrics. What's your main talent? Lying? We politicians are experts, all experts on the craft, pal. It seems like he had an unguarded moment here, because I would seriously doubt that anyone that receives a lot of...
He lost his filter.
It seems like he lost his filter.
Yes, yes.
He recognizes it, though. He continues, sorry, I got carried away.
By what?
Please don't take my outburst personally, and don't stop sending the checks via APAC. I'm just venting. We'll always be BFFs forever. Last request. Stop feeding Huckabee so much cinnamon toast crunch. The last time he boarded a diplomatic plane, it barely lifted off due to excess weight. Sincerely, Speaker Mikey J. I didn't know that they were
TVN wants his...
they folks.
It's Star back so he can continue to do worthless interviews.
James O'Keefe thinks that he's got people that can get into some of the deepest crevices of power, lest he knew that we have connections in Israeli intelligence that'll get us the words directly from the Speaker of the House to none other than Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, what do you think we have to do with this? Because now that they've seen the transmission, obviously, we're in trouble. We're in a whole heap of trouble.
I think we quietly put it back tonight.
We could do that.
Via DHL.
It's a good idea.
We burn the evidence.
It's a good idea. I just love how he put that little ribbon
Or
on
we
the,
can put it on the Epstein file and it'll never be opened.
That's right. Well, folks, what do we have for the audience on
The
this
19th Amendment.
The 19th Amendment.
The one right before the 20th.
By the way,
right after the 18th.
we don't get derailed on these things. Some of you people think that we lose our minds on this. No, we know
we
our
lost
minds
our
have
mind
never
a
been
long
lost.
time ago.
There was an argument that broke out just a few days ago on X between Christians about those on one corner whom was saying that we need to repeal the 19th Amendment because, and they enumerated a few things happening in the political sphere by which they're saying it would be best if we eliminate universal suffrage. There were those on the opposite corner whom were questioning the character, the moral fiber of those whom would argue against universal suffrage. That being the case, a few people, they saw the interaction and they decided for us to weigh in on the debate, on the back and forth, and see where we stood on the matter. Now, agree or disagree? One thing that you can be assured of...
So are we weighing in as Christians or just plain old folks?
Well, I think we have to voice our opinion as both. First and foremost, because I believe, as we've said before, that we allow Christian principle to dictate our views on the matter, and therefore there is an objective way of approaching these things once you apply Christian principles. Not only that, we pay taxes. So therefore, we get to opine as both believers and as citizens.
But every now and then, Christians have a moment for the flesh.
When you say...
A carnal moment. A
Now,
moment where they
that
don't
needs to
think
be defined.
biblically. They don't think biblically. According to the flesh, this is Paul. Paul teaches that, there's a battle, a raging battle between the spirit and the flesh. And those that lean on the flesh, they're carnally minded.
Correct.
And so I'm just wondering if today's opinion is going to be carnally minded or spiritually minded.
I'll tell you one thing. Some people say that, in my case, that they can't make up their minds as to in which aspect I comment, carnally or spiritually. We'll leave that up
That's like
to the audience
old
to
Archie
decide.
Bunker line. People just didn't get the fact that he was a good Christian because he called his son-in-law meathead.
And he was a meathead, by the way.
It's another way of saying carnal head.
He was a
Carnally minded.
meathead, absolutely.
Meathead.
Well, there were a couple of tweets that stood out. I'm not going to show you the screenshot just for the sake of time, but there's a couple of tweets that stand out from us because it encapsulates what those on one particular side of the ledger were arguing. And again, since most of these arguments are now becoming mainstream, but what I mean by mainstream is that before, where it used to be unfathomable that these truths, as some would call them in American culture, weren't questioned because they were widely accepted. I mean, upwards of 90% of agreement on these things. Now there's conversations, there are conversations to be had online on certain platforms that are beginning the conversation asking as to whether or not blanket acceptance, unconditional acceptance of certain ideas are actually good. And this is another one of those that I believe that we actually, it's good for us to engage, because Christians in particular, and this is something that I want to touch on in the not too distant future, but nevertheless, the subject allows us to branch out to that subject. There have been so many things that have been deemed acceptable, and persons have peddled to Christians as biblically acceptable because there is an abuse and a twisting and a distortion of scripture. It takes the Christian principles to places that, and ideas that it never endorses, but Nevertheless, it appears as if they are biblically backed ideas, only to find out that not only was the application erroneous, but the backing for it, the foundation for it, was actually a misinterpretation and intentional distortion of scripture, as I believe this idea of universal suffrage actually is.
Okay.
Good enough. Here's a couple tweets. We have one from a so-called Rachel Greenberg. I don't know who she is. I didn't mind to do any of the investigation of who she is on this edition, because what matters to me in this entire thing is her tweet. This is what she is quoted as saying or writing. I've blocked 3 men on Facebook in the past few days, all of whom I've known for years to one degree or another, including NAPARC pastor, for supporting this repeal the 19th garbage. If you don't think God considers me just as intelligent and valuable as his male followers, we are not friends. If you don't think I deserve representation in government, we are not friends. And it's not me, it's 100% you. Now, on the surface, that sounds innocuous. That sounds actually aligned with biblical principles. Someone responded by the name of Sam Stanley. He looks to me, or Staley rather, he looks to me to be an FSU grad, Florida State. He's associated somehow with Florida State University. And he replies to her tweet by writing the following. The whole 19th Amendment repeal stuff seems very anti-biblical. Jesus shunned politics in his ministry. The path to redemption and salvation was through him, not the Romans or Pharisees. I'm glad that these people posted this, because in essence, they have encapsulated, this is my first point, they have encapsulated what the arguments are for favoring certain policy decisions, when in fact, when one looks at the Bible, one notices that there are essential flaws in their ideas. The problem is, and we've talked about this issue before, a lot of Christians don't actually question the premises that are presented to them, and even the texts themselves, not talking about the infallibility of the same, but rather if there is application of those texts or those very things that they say that there is application here. In this case, we're talking about universal suffrage, meaning that everyone above the age of 18 has the right to vote.
So let me see if I understand this so far. We are against, I think we both are, taxation without representation.
Naturally.
But some people want representation without paying taxes.
Correct.
And I'll give you an example. Let's take a student. He's of voting age, but he's not working, therefore he's not paying taxes. Why should he get a vote?
Furthermore, I would add to that, why would he annul the vote of somebody like yourself or another who actually pays more in taxes with respect to property ownership and other things of the sort?
And furthermore, why should he get a vote to impose more taxes on me so he can get more benefits?
Correct.
Even though he's not producing income and therefore not paying taxes, and therefore, why does he get a vote?
I'm glad you mentioned this, because there's a couple of avenues that we can go.
By the
with.
way, I have some text, because some people will actually believe that Jesus did not take up the matter of taxes. And I believe the Bible talks very clearly about taxes, to the point that when he answers, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar and unto God what belongs to God, I think he's actually saying that in the Old Testament, what most people are calling tithes and offerings, it was a tax system.
Yes, it was. It was in essence a tax system. By the way, I'm glad you mentioned this, because now that we're talking about, it's a side note, but nevertheless relevant. Since we're talking about the systems of governance, please remember, God has nothing to say with respect to what is known today as liberal democracy. However, the governance structure that he instituted for Israel, because this guy, Sam Staley, he uses this blanket statement that I've heard Christians use before to justify ignorance of the political system, so that Christians won't use Christian principles to make decisions, proper decisions with respect to voting in a so-called liberal democracy. Again, the whole 19th Amendment repeal stuff seems very anti-biblical.
Well, if this guy wants it biblical, he should ask all of Israel to return to a theocracy.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because God did establish a system of governance for Israel, which, by the way, Israel itself shunned, because he established a system of judges through Moses. Israel rejects that, and they want a monarch. And God tells them, no, a monarch is not good for you, but they end up rejecting, and they say, still, we want a monarch over us. So we can't.
But even that, if you want to be biblical about it, the Lord is called King of Kings.
Right.
So you have a monarch there.
But now let's get into the meat of the thing. I guess we are, but let's get further into the meat of the thing. Did everybody in Israel, so-called, because this guy says Jesus shunned politics in his ministry. Of course, he would hide himself by saying, no, I'm saying in his ministry. No, the implication here is very, very evident. It's
When they
obvious
asked
to
him
me.
questions about taxation, he could have said, I don't opine on taxation because I just stay away from politics
He
completely.
didn't do that.
He didn't do
He did.
exactly.
As a matter of fact, one of his most heavy or heaviest criticisms were among the Herodians. The Herodians were essentially a political group that was just seeking, as it were, favor with Herod and the political connections there that were made with Rome, as it were, to get ahead, as it were, in society.
Jesus was very clear about taxes. And if time permits, we'll
Yeah.
visit a couple of those verses.
Let me get to the essence here of what I'm trying to get at. You'll note that, and the reason we selected these tweets out to make them a sampling, to make them a main example of the arguments that are typically made by Christians to discourage questioning things that are held by maybe the vast majority of the populace as it pertains to a political position or not. On one end, you'll have people, and this is the case of Greenberg, she will say, but my essential humanity, I'm created in the image of God. And therefore, any attempts to disenfranchise me, they will say, is an attack against my essential humanity. By golly, why is it that God, in the system that he instituted for Israel, didn't give everybody a one man or one family vote, as it were, as to who was going to be the judges or who was going to be the monarch, if he thinks so highly of democracy?
God is righteous. That's my understanding. And so if you don't have a weighted vote system, then what you have is something that is not fair. I'll go back to my example. Let's take a young man, a young lady who is of voting age already, but he or she is going to college, or mom and dad says, hey, take it easy. We got plenty of money. You don't need to produce any income. So you don't have to pay taxes. Just do what you do. Enjoy life. But that person gets a vote. Okay. So that person is getting representation, even though that person is not really taxed. Yeah, but
Right.
mom and dad are taxed. It's one vote per person.
Right.
So-
Universal enfranchisement, that's what they believe.
Otherwise, I could buy, with my money, let's say, the rights of voting for 100 people that they don't produce any money, therefore they don't get taxed. Anyway,
What do they got to say?
that's
I mean,
my point.
it's- exactly.
So it's not about male or female. It's about some people pay a lot less in taxes than others. For example, we have a student not working, not paying taxes, nevertheless voting. Now we have a person that is working, paying his or her taxes and voting. We have a person that's paying even more taxes because she happens to be a homeowner, but they don't get a weighted or a thicker, a more valued vote, even though he or she is paying more taxes.
Correct.
Because with your home taxes, now you pay for their schooling and you pay for the fire department and you pay for so many other things. Furthermore, now you have a person that is paying money on his or her taxes, paying taxes via the home, and happens to own a business,
Yes.
paying even more taxes. But
Licenses, business taxes.
he doesn't
et
get a
cetera, et cetera.
weighted
Correct.
tax that he gets the same representation as this person that is not paying any taxes at all.
That's inherently unfair.
Where is the fairness
Exactly.
in that?
That's inherently unfair because one is actually producing more for society.
Because I know
than the
where
other.
people are going to want to take this. Oh, you don't want women to vote. In my mind, if you have skin in the game, or according to the amount of skin that you have in the game, by all means, you should vote.
The thing, when you begin to analyze this further, folks, the essence of the argument that they're making is that I should simply be represented for certain attributes. And part of those attributes, I'm created in the image of God. That's the way the Christian, the nominal Christian, would present it. But again, we go back to other considerations. Why would you want people, for example, because your point is well taken and a good one, but let's also look at this from another aspect.
Okay.
Why would we want people that have no vested interest, neither do they have any interest in knowing how the system itself works? Neither are they interested in actually making an informed decision, because the voting, even though it's become nonchalant in many people's minds, voting is something that is necessarily important and carries with it a lot of weight and responsibility.
Yeah, but the
Some would
problem
think.
you're pointing out is part of what I have called for many years the dumbing down of America. And it goes back to the school system, where we have no idea what type of government this is, or the forefathers gave to us, or what the Bible says about taxes. And since we don't have any idea of what it is that we are supposed to be enjoying and protecting, ideologues come into the scene. They lie to people. They believe they're junk, and they vote in that manner.
Correct.
And so By the way, in the very near future, and this is a piece of advertisement, I'm going to bring something to you, my friends, because in New Jersey, there is a town where parents could be fined severely and be thrown in jail for the acts of their kids, what their kids do. This is a law now in that town.
Yeah.
So you don't really get the right to discipline the child the way you would, rear the child the way you think the Bible teaches you to. Nevertheless, you are going to pay consequences if your boy, your girl, your kids don't do what the government says they should be saying. And I'll have a lot more to say on that. As believers, you better believe it. You need to pay attention because these kinds of things are coming down the pipe. Why? Because our kids are on a rebellious streak that has a lot of people scared. And here's the problem. The people that provoked all this maliciousness in young people, now they don't want to own it. They want to blame you, Mom. They want to blame me. They want to blame us and have us pay fines and even incarceration because of what they have taught the kids. So either Sunday or next Wednesday, I'm going to bring that because I think it has to be tackled.
Right.
Gio, going back to our topic, if we have no idea of how we should vote to keep something that obviously a lot of people are interested in, how do you know a lot of people are interested in? They're interested in our country because they're coming here in droves.
Right.
So if you have no idea what it is you're coming into or how to protect it, how could you be rewarded or given the responsibility of a vote unless you first find out what you have walked into and what you should do, have to do to protect it?
Here's the essential.
You could become a tool to destroy something that you supposedly came into this place, into this nation to enjoy and protect.
You've built the perfect segue for what I was about to say. Number one, if we're going to take this argument philosophically that everyone is created in the image of God and therefore they get representation and they get a right to vote, where does that consideration end? With 16-year-olds? With 8-year-olds? With babies? Now, I know that what I'm about to mention now, these creatures are not created in the image and likeness of God, but they were created by God. So dogs, cats get the vote.
A person with split personalities.
They get two votes.
Two votes.
Because they get, especially if they are multipolar, as they are saying. So it depends how many personalities abide in the same person.
Up the Gadarene.
The Gadarene would get
He would have racked
Legion.
up thousands.
He
of
probably
votes.
would represent one entire district, probably the one that Mike Johnson represents.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you can get a law firm to represent him.
Exactly. Folks, when you think about this, that is one of those arguments then that this is where in philosophy and debate we call that the slippery slope fallacy, because there's actually no cutoff. So you can't use that as an argument to favor your position, because if it continues down that slippery slope, it gets really dark really quick. But there's another point to be made here. And this is a long history, what I'm about to condense in the next 30 seconds, look this up on your own time because we've taken the time to investigate this and the history is clear on the matter. The fact of the matter is that as it pertains to universal suffrage, especially in the West, more specifically Great Britain and the United States, those movements that were germinated in order to give the one man, one vote idea, thereby turning over the systems that were in place for hundreds of years in one case in Britain and for about 120, 130 years in the case of the United States, was actually begun top down. And by top down, I'm talking about wealthy industrialists, by persons whom had a bone to pick with Christianity and others. Gio, but you're saying then that these ideas necessarily then were instituted, they were implemented and driven forward by persons who were antagonistic to the gospel. Exactly. I'll give you one example. What is it that they've typically told us, the history books, the mainstream history will teach us? Well, the suffragettes, the first and second wave movements of feminism, what they wanted was equality before the eyes of the law, hence the 19th Amendment, hence what eventually happened in Britain. Folks, what if I were to tell you that 100 years, it was only 100 years before women also got the right to vote universally in Britain that the men had gotten it? Wait, what, Gio? I'm going to repeat that again. In Great Britain, only 100 years before women, every woman was given the right, as it were, was considered to have the right to vote. In the 20th century, early 20th century, only 100 years before that was every man, as it were, considered to be universal suffrage, the ability to vote. Well, why so recent? I was never informed of that. It was also the same way in the United States. Only the landowners, as it were, only the people that had, lo and behold, skin in the game, where to vote. Why? And this included, by the way, don't let the history propagandists, those that will teach you ahistorical things to make their point seem stronger, don't let them lie to you. There were a lot of women at that time that voted because they also were landowners. They had skin in the game. In many instances, when they were widowed, that property was passed on to the woman, and she would vote as one vote for the rest of the family. That's the way it was up until about 150 years ago in the West. Why was that? Here's an interesting tidbit, and I want you to think about this evening. Did you know that when the 19th Amendment was ratified, one of the interesting things happened? Politicians during the Calvin Coolidge administration, during that time, they were worried that women, now that they were given universal suffrage via the 19th Amendment, that they were going to come out in droves and vote, and that was going to necessarily change the makeup politically of the United States. You know when it actually materialized, that phenomenon? During the hippie era. Why? When you look at the demographics and when you look at the studies and when you look at the surveys in the early 20th century, a lot of women, they themselves were writing letters saying, we know where this is going to lead. This is actually going to lead to divisions within the family where the husband is going to vote one way and women are going to vote, their wives are going to vote in another way, and there will be, as it were, a chasm within the very same household, which, by the way, the voting patterns, as they've been studied, as it were, now actually show that in many instances, if you look at some of the graphs, women are actually becoming more and more liberal, while men in the country are actually becoming more and more conservative, so-called, especially younger men and younger women, respectively, and that necessarily has changed the voting patterns that are leading to divisions even within the family. So all of these things, as it were, although they were presented, I'm giving you just a rough sketch, a rough summary of what happened throughout the last 150 years, so-called, it actually ended up disintegrating society further than actually bringing forth this utopia that was actually promised by the Susan B. Anthonys of life, which, by the way, she was a virulent anti-Christian and atheist. They don't tell you that. A lot of conservatives will tell you Susan B. Anthony was against abortion. She was actually a dyed-in-the-wool feminist. Same thing with Elizabeth Katie Stanton, I'm sorry, and others. They don't give you the truth about who these people were. And behind the scenes, they were actually working with wealthy industrialists like Carnegie, like Rockefeller, and others to peddle an idea that most women in the United States and in Britain, they did not want. Why? Well, lo and behold, we find Rockefeller's own writings. We find Carnegie's own writings. One of the reasons they wanted women to get universal suffrage and be considered, as it were, so-called, and they use that word very euphemistically, equal, is because they wanted to dilute, as it were, the pool with respect to the workers going into the workforce. They wanted women to come out of the homes, as it were, into the workforce, so that it was diluting, as it were, the supply of workers that they had. That way they wouldn't have to increase the wages of their workers. This was all planned. This was all manipulated. Look it up. A lot of these things, what I'm getting at is that these movements were actually top down and not grassroots up, but they use certain presentations and even biblical language to give the impression that they're actually putting forth ideas that align with biblical principles when their intentions were actually pretty nefarious from the very beginning.
So Gio has given you a short version of history there. I'm going to give you a short version of what I see behind all these things, and I can bring it down to a couple of words: power grab. We're seeing something very similar now, cooking, boiling even, and it's called, let's give illegals voting rights. So the idea is to get more people in your corner to vote for you. Of course, they promise you this, that, and the other thing. They're going to give it to you. How are they going to give you these things? They take it away from the people that fairly and unfairly, even because we get taxed up the wazoo, pay taxes, and then they give it to them. So I quoted before something that most young people should know. And if you know something about this country and the way we revolted and we said, we've had enough of you, England. Taxation without representation. In this country, we get taxed up the wazoo so that people that don't pay taxes, they're not even from here legally, they get our goods, the goods that the politicians promise them.
And the benefits.
And the benefits, we pay for all of that. Yep. And then on top of that, they want to give them voting rights so they can tax us some more and give away more of whatever it is that they give away so these people can vote for them. And the cycle never ends.
And the arguments are the same from the suffragette movement on. We're all made in the image of God,
it's a power grab to get a hold of the power and keep it. We have the same thing going on with gerrymandering now. And unfortunately, Christians don't pick up on this. Oh, they'll go, wait a minute, I'm up for sainthood. I don't participate in these conversations. Well, I hear you're participating when you go, well, look at my check. Look at the chunk they took out. Now you're participating, but you do it privately. We do it publicly because we actually don't care if you like us or not. We have to say what we have to say. We believe we're in the right. We believe we're being biblical about this. But you who are going out there saying, no, 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 Christ never touched these things, and neither do I. You know you do, because, again, when you see that paycheck, you go, dang, that's a lot of taxes that I'm paying, and I don't even know that I get to enjoy the benefits of all this taxation. There goes somebody with an iPhone. There goes somebody with one of these pay-as-you-go card. I see them all the time at Walmart. And other
the
places.
EBT cards,
Yeah. And so the point is that they give away stuff that doesn't belong to them. How do they get it? Through taxation. And who do they get it from? Us. And then the argument is everybody has to be represented. Why?
Yeah.
There was a thing that the Romans imposed on the Jews. The Jews didn't like it. It was called the imperial tax. And they approached Jesus with the imperial tax question. Should we be paying taxes to Caesar or not? And the Word of God says that Jesus knew they were tempting him. They were trying to get him in trouble. And he said, what's that money there? And who's the face and the inscription? What is this all about? Well, that's Caesar. And all hail Caesar is the way we're supposed to go. And Caesar is like God. We can even petition Caesar. The truth of the matter is that the imperial tax was something that the Romans imposed on subjects.
Yes.
They never imposed that one on their own citizens.
No, they did not.
And so when you see Jesus answering these things, they marveled. They had no way to get him. They tried to get him, but they couldn't. He said, well, go ahead and render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and render to God what belongs to God. And then on another occasion, Gio, now the Romans, they were taxing the Jews with the imperial tax, but now the Jews said, hey, we can pick up on this. Why don't we start a temple tax?
That's right.
And they approached
that
Peter.
money's not enough. You're going to have to do, we have to give you the temple money, but at an exchange rate where we make a profit off of it.
So listen to all of this. And supposedly Jesus didn't tackle the issue. They approached Peter, who was next to Jesus, and they asked him, does your teacher, does he pay the temple tax? And Peter answered, yes. Maybe he saw him pay that before. I don't know. But Jesus, understanding that this was the question that was going to be tackled, said, Peter, what about this taxation situation? Who do they usually tax? Their own children or the foreigners? Well, the foreigners. And the kids? Well, they're exempt. And so Jesus points out the fact that the taxation systems of the world, they are totally unfair.
Yep.
And that's my catapult. That's my launching pad.
Yep.
No matter how you present it to me, at the end, I'll be able to see the unfairness in it. And when I call it out, you're not going to like it.
Yep.
Because that 19-year-old who is in college, not working, and still wants a boat, in New York City, she wants Mondami. And I'm saying, why should I have...
and she wants you to pay for her infanticide.
Exactly.
Right.
And I'm going, why? You're not working. You're not paying taxes. I'm working. I'm paying taxes. I'm paying home taxes. I'm paying my business taxes. And you mean to tell me your boat is just as important as mine?
When you think about it...
No, that has to stop.
Actually, when you think about it, her vote actually becomes more powerful than yours in a sense.
Of course, because once again, you have to go behind the scenes, and this is what I've been trying to say. It's a power grab. How do we get a hold of this? Well, we might take a year, perhaps a generation, maybe two, but we'll work behind the scenes, take over the system, the schooling system, take over television, take over the films, indoctrinate these kids. Next thing you know, they have the right to vote. They'll vote for us, and we just not only get the power, we have a transference.
Right.
Of goods and riches.
That's right.
And they take it from you and they give it to themselves.
All under the guise of we're all created in the image of God and we all deserve representation.
Suffrage, suffrage, suffrage.
So if you've heard anything we've had to say, some of you will ask, well, where do you land on the repeal of the 19th stuff? I'm going to say personally, I think we can't be any clearer than what we've mentioned on this point. I don't believe in universal suffrage because of the reasons that we have already aforementioned to this point. It's inherently a system that is not only unfair, it actually takes from those that work. It takes from those that work hard, that work honestly. It steals their money, as it were, and steals their resources and gives it to those for the incentivization of give me the power.
So what about those illegals that are paying taxes? Well, if you came to this country to work legally, you're paying taxes for the opportunity to make more than what you were making in your own place. That still doesn't give you a right to vote here.
Right.
And if you're here illegally,
Exactly.
and you're paying taxes with the hopes that maybe someday a judge will say, "Oh, good for you, you pay taxes," it still doesn't give you a right to vote and make decisions for us.
Yep.
This is the country for Americans.
Right.
Thankfully, there are laws in the books that allow you to be a naturalized citizen. Well, glory to God for that. A lot of us waited in line, and we thank God for the opportunity to come to this country, and for the people that thought perhaps we can bring others in so they can enjoy the American dream and the American lifestyle. I have fully embraced it. I don't speak against this country. I love this country. I heard this woman from Guatemala saying Guatemala first, USA second, and now some people are bent out of shape. Jews have been saying this for the longest time. Israel first, USA second.
That's right.
If you're in this country, if you're an American, if you enjoy the benefits of America, if you're an American citizen, you should be thanking God for this country and protecting it. And so if you have skin in the game, I'm talking about citizens, by all means, demand your right to vote. But let's have a fair system where if you pay more taxes, that has to be taken into consideration, because
That's right.
they're taking a lot of your skin into the game. And a person who's not working, just, weaving their way through life, their vote summed up because all the system has piled up on their behalf against us, ripping us apart. There's no fairness in that.
There's also another thing that we could mention, but I think we're pretty much coming to the end of this broadcast, and it is this. Also, why would you want a person whom has not reached maturity to actually participate in the political discourse in the first place? If there's one thing that we've noticed,
That would include in today's generation a lot of 40 and 50
well,
year olds.
you're right about that. You're
They
absolutely
have
right.
not reached maturity.
But how many people have we heard that somehow they have a public platform where they themselves have admitted, yeah, when I was younger, I tended to vote more liberal, but then I came to my senses when I had a kid and I got married, et cetera, and I started voting differently. Then you have to ask yourself, why would we allow that element to even vote at that point? Because by their own admission, by and large, they were practically stupid and allowed themselves to be manipulated into voting a certain
we could
way.
see the wisdom in these arguments if we could only understand that we've been duped. There's a power grab behind the scenes, behind all of these ideas, and we don't seem to get it because they play these songs that pull on our heartstrings.
That's right.
And all of a sudden, yeah, they need representation. Yeah, absolutely. They got to have it, even though they're going to destroy us with it and they have no skin in the game.
That's right.
They got to have it because they got to have it.
Well, the last example. Now the UK, since Labour, the leftist so-called party, is in power, guess what they're trying to institute by the cover of night? 16-year-olds voting. Why? When they studied the demographics, they said, if we get 16-year-olds to vote, we'll never leave power again. But of course, they hide their designs and couch all of their intent behind, we're just doing this because we want maximum
It's a
participation.
power grab and it's a transfer of wealth.
Exactly.
Anytime you hear things like reparations, and by the way, the Guatemalan
From
woman,
Illinois, yeah.
she's talking reparations also.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. These people come, I've said it before, they come here with these ideas because guess what? Whitey is bad and we have to extract everything because somehow they oppressed us, even though this lady seems like Jasmine Crockett, that Congresswoman from Texas, that they had a pretty good
I think
upbringing.
we're right smack in the middle of a house divided.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's what Christ said, and
Yep.
we're living a moment like this.
There you go. Well, folks, that's what we have for you on this edition of Irrespective. Please send your regards to the retard of the week, more specifically, Congressman, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Remember, we have the letter that we pulled from the so-called Wailing Wall, his personal letter to Bibi, to prove it.
We don't want to be like Mike,
No.
either the basketball player
Or this
or
Mike.
the politician.
Well, he signed his name Mikey J. It seems like they have good good relationships with Bibi.
Mikey J.
Before we sign off, do not forget to subscribe, to hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube, and also on all platforms to hit the thumbs up. When there's organic interest, the algorithms pick that up and they begin to suggest the content to others. Also, don't forget to donate. It helps us to continue to put out this content for your edification. The links for everything that I've just mentioned are obviously beneath the video player. Please do that for us and also share the content. Let the word out about Irrespective. Our next gathering will be on Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Don't forget the topic that I mentioned, folks. It's a horrible thing. My apologies. It's a horrible thing when you can't bring up your kids the way you want to because the school system and the ideas and the ideologues that are working behind films and music. It's a horrible thing when you can't rear your kids up the way that you want to. So they turn them into little monsters. And once the little monsters start doing what little monsters do, now they're coming after you, the parents. It starts with one city. And next thing you know, it takes hold and it engulfs the nation. What do they want to do? They want to fine parents. There's 28 rules, things that kids can break where the parents can be fined if the kids are repeat offenders and even incarcerated. You don't want to miss this. Either Sunday or next Wednesday, we're going to bring that to you.
That's all we have for now. Until the next occasion that we gather, may the Lord shine his face upon you.